Hello everyone. I'm very pleased to say that I've finally managed to hook up with Clive De Carle, who I've been really looking forward to speaking to for quite a while. I've been following Clive for must be a couple of years now, actually. I can't remember where I first came across you, but I know my good friend Mark Devlin has interviewed you, and I've been following, you've got the Secret Health Club, which we can talk about, but if you want to just kind of introduce yourself to the standers, kind of explain who you are and what you do, that would be great.
Well, sure. Thanks, Fifi. Well, I was in ophthalmic optics for many years, and I also sort of dabbled in the neurosurgery field. So I had a bit of a close observation. I'd sit in on brain surgeries and stuff like that. So I was always interested in health, and I was incredibly healthy all my life until I got to about 30, 31, 32, and I had some embarrassing spots on my face. Now, what I should have done is started eating better. I mean, it was silly. I was eating sandwiches at the sandwich bar and a couple of Mars bars a day, really not taking care of myself. Even though I knew much better, but I just lost it. Anyway, so stupidly, I went to a doctor, and the doctor says, "Oh, no problem. I can give you an antibiotic for that. We'll have your spots fixed in no time." And in no time at all, I started not seeing very well, and then I started not walking very well, and I went fairly rapidly downhill over a course of 2 or 3 months maybe, and then I realized I could no longer drive my car. I didn't have the strength. And then one day, I wake up in the morning and I can't get out of bed. I've got so little strength left that I can't get out of bed. And I think, well, maybe I can get dressed. And I've got some clothes by the side, and I realize I can't get dressed. I'm in so much pain, absolute agony. And by this time also, I've developed type 1 diabetes, which normally people get when they're born with it or very early on in life. But there I am, early 30s, and I've become type 1 diabetic. And my intuition was telling me, well, I think it's the antibiotic. Because I couldn't think of anything else. I just carried, nothing had changed to make me suddenly collapse like that. Anyway, they had no choice but to put me into hospital. And over a few weeks, they kept on offering me drugs. And I said, well, look, I'm not low on drugs, I may be low on vitamins and minerals, but I'm certainly not low on drugs. Yeah. And I got worse and worse, and I was sweating so much they had to change the bedclothes every 2 hours, and I was in the observation ward and people watching me day and night, and they said, well, there's nothing we can do. We've done every test possible, we've run everything, there's nothing we can do, and I'm afraid, it's not looking good, and in a while we may have to cut your feet off. Sounds great in your early 30s. So anyway, luckily, while I didn't really have the strength to lift books very easily, with a book stand on the bed, I could turn the pages. And I started reading everything I could possibly get to figure out what was wrong with me. And it became fairly obvious within 3 weeks of being in hospital that I was indeed low on vitamins and minerals, and that something, the antibiotic, had somehow, to a large degree, destroyed my immune system. So I researched what to do next, and I found one of the few people in London who seemed to know what they were doing. Patrick Holford, his name was, still famous now. And I went to see him. He was younger than I was. And I said, what do I do? And he said, well, look, one of the first things you need to know if you've got arthritis is that you're going to be low on magnesium. And he said, I'm pretty sure you're going to be low on vitamin C. And he ran through a few simple supplements, and he was right. He was absolutely right. And it took a year and a half for me to completely lose all the arthritis. The pain I was experiencing was rheumatoid arthritis all over my body. If I'd shown you my hand, you would have said, how old is that hand? Is it 80 years old? Because it was all nasty looking. And so I reversed rheumatoid arthritis. Now, doctors today tell you that's not possible. Yeah. Rheumatoid arthritis is irreversible. No, it's not. it's perfectly reversible. Now, unfortunately, I never managed to reverse the type 1 diabetes because once the pancreas is damaged, it's not an easy job to put it right. But it's worth noting, just as an aside, that anybody with type 2 diabetes, most people can recover from type 2 diabetes in 30 days.
Wow,
You know,
30 days.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can explain how it's done with diet and supplements and so on. And so I realized that as a type 1 diabetic, I was going to be low on chromium and probably vanadium. Now, just back to type 2 for a minute. Every type 2 diabetic tested, as far as I know, has been shown to be low on chromium.
Mhm.
Every single one.
Taking notes here. So that's okay, chromium.
So
Mm.
so I recovered basically, and then a while after that, my dad's best friend got cancer for the second time, and he took me aside and said, "Look, I've got kidney cancer. They removed the first kidney, and I haven't got a spare one left. I'm not going to go down the surgery route again." And of course, he'd been recommended chemotherapy and what have you. But he knew my story that I had recovered without the help of the doctors, or you might say, despite the doctors. And so he went along the same lines as me, but he went one big step further. Back then, one of the very famous people around, one of the famous scientists, was Dr. Linus Pauling. And Linus Pauling was one of the few people who won the Nobel Prize by himself twice. Not many people, well, nobody else at that point had ever done that. Anyway, he was on the front page of Time magazine because he claimed that vitamin C would cure the common cold and any other infectious illnesses. And on the one hand, he was being praised, but by most of the press and obviously the pharmaceutical industry, he was being slated for claiming that vitamin C could be more effective than a drug. Anyway, my dad's best friend finds him in the phone book in New York, rings him up, the guy answers, and he said, "What do I do?" He says, "Why don't you take 35 grams of vitamin C every day in small divided doses?" And I think he recommended a few other vitamins and minerals. And anyway, my dad's best friend, who'd been given, I think, 12 weeks to live, lived another 20 years. And when he did die, it wasn't from cancer. So at that point, I was running what ended up, well, no, I wasn't, sorry, I'd started, but had stepped away from, still a few shares in, what ended up as being the UK's largest contact lens company. So a bit after getting well, I had sold my house in England, moved out to Spain and got an organic farm and was living a different life to I had before in the ophthalmic industry. And one day the telephone rings, and it's one of the guys from the company. Now, I haven't turned up for a board meeting for about 16 years at this point at the contact lens company I'd started. Anyway, they said, "Well, we just sold it to Johnson & Johnson and you're a millionaire." I thought, I thought,
Wow.
that's good. Anyway, so then the next thing I had to think about was, well, what am I going to do with my life? At that point, I had the organic farm, but that was fun, but it wasn't my thing. At that point, I also had, well, anyway, so I thought, well, what am I going to do? And I thought, well, my dad's best friend, me recovering, I'll study health. And so I started really going into, I had the time and the money to study. So I put myself on quite a long course of learning, which is obviously it's never ended. I'm still learning every day. And then after, I don't know, 10 years of studying and doing a little bit of helping a few people, somebody said, "Well, you ought to start doing talks." So I, I was one of these people, when I was at school, I was a total failure at school, never passed any exams. No, well, I did get O-level woodwork. I'm very proud of
Okay.
O-level woodwork.
Um,
And, but that was it. And, I was, as they say, that you can be educated and you can be schooled, and luckily I didn't let my schooling get in the way of my education, mainly because I didn't turn up most of the time. I left on my 16th birthday. Anyway, so I thought, well, look, I'll study health. And then I started giving talks, and people started getting better. It wasn't just me and my dad's best friend. All sorts of people who've been told you have an irrecoverable, irreversible
Yeah.
disease. A lot of people are told it's genetic. There's nothing you can do, accept it and die. And I began to realize that that wasn't the case. As you know, there's epigenetics. Crick and Watson, the people who discovered DNA, they claimed that your DNA dictates your fate. But actually, we now know that's not true at all. You can override your DNA by supplements, eating, thinking. We are what we eat, drink, think, and do, aren't we?
Absolutely.
So that's where I am now, really. I try to explain in language that people can understand, hopefully, that, well, maybe it's easy. Maybe it's actually easy to get better, and maybe there is a massive conspiracy with the press, the pharmaceutical industry, and the government, surprise, surprise, to keep you ignorant of the fact that we're self-repairing. Can I give you an example? Let's say we went down to the zoo, and we've been to the zoo before. Normally all the animals in the zoo look pretty healthy, don't they? But let's say one day half of them are ill. What would be the first question you'd ask the zookeeper if half the animals are ill? I believe that question would be, what are you feeding those animals?
Mm-hmm.
I think it'd be a pretty obvious question. Now, well over half of the English population are ill. Is anybody looking at what they're eating? Because unfortunately, most people, a lot of them unwittingly, are eating food that's been poisoned.
Yeah.
And that's maybe the biggest problem out there, that people are drinking poisoned water, they're not filtering it. Maybe they've got a Brita filter thinking that's enough, but it isn't. Uh, we have to stop feeding the monster, which is the agricultural pharmaceutical conglomerate,
Yeah.
who are destroying the soil. When I was young, if they ploughed the field, loads of different species of birds would be eating the worms and the beetles and everything. Now they're not, because there aren't any worms and beetles to eat anymore. The birds are gone, the bats are gone, and children don't know it. I mean, uh, you're probably too young to remember this, but when I was young, I'm 67, so when I was young, if I drove up to London, for instance, every half an hour or hour in the spring, I'd have to stop the car and get stuff to clean the headlights because I couldn't see anymore because so many dead insects were on the headlights. And water wouldn't do. You had to get special sprays in those days to dissolve the Armageddon of insects. And there'd be another Armageddon on the windscreen. After a while, you had to stop because you couldn't see anymore. Now, on the windscreen of your car, I'd be willing to bet there is not one insect.
Yeah, it's true. I've not actually thought about that. I mean, okay, I might not be quite your age, but I do remember, actually, I've been driving for 20 something years. I do remember there being more bugs splattering on the windscreen. Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's scary.
And it's all really down to the agriculture.
Yeah,
They've
absolutely.
changed agriculture in so many ways. Not only are they spraying chemicals and so on there,
Yeah.
but they've hybridized wheat.
Hmm.
When I was young, I never heard of anybody having a problem with wheat or gluten.
No.
Never heard of it. Then suddenly, introduction of Roundup, the glyphosate and hybridizing the wheat, and suddenly half the people in the world don't seem to be able to eat the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There's always a reaction to this unnatural, these things that are introduced that there's just no place for them really. And I was actually like writing some notes down earlier before coming on to speak to you. And yeah, toxic environment, that seems to be something that's weakened our immune systems to such a point now where illness is just of all types is just rampant. We've got toxic air from the chemtrails. We've got toxic air from the chemicals that are being sprayed on crops. We've got things in water, leaching into our water system, that, like you say, a Brita filter is not going to do it. The very food we're eating, I mean, the stuff that we're kind of feeding ourselves in our minds as well, the things that we're consuming when we're watching, you know, that's has a toxifying effect that can be felt physically as well. And with, you know, regards to what we're in currently, what's your idea around shedding and that kind of thing? I wanted to ask you specifically what your views were, because I got sick actually between when we first were in contact, and I wanted to have a chat with you. I went down with what I call flu. It was a horrible, horrible flu. I've not had anything like that in decades, and it's highly, highly unusual. I was not ill at all throughout 2020 when all of this started, and it only seems to be since the were introduced that people are getting sick on a level that I've never seen before, and that's people who are jabbed and unjabbed, and many, many unjabbed. What's your ideas about, you know, what might be causing it? Is it all tied in with the jabs, or do you think there's something potentially out there?
Well, it's such an interesting question, and I haven't studied the science enough to really be able to answer that correctly. So, you know, it's so strange. You probably know that over the last 100 years, they have done various tests. They've got people with very bad flu
Yeah.
to spit and cough and get the snot out of their nose, and they've shoved it up other people's noses and down other people's throats, but never proven infection,
No.
which is totally counterintuitive. You know, we all feel at some point we've caught something, but whether we really have or not, I don't know. I mean, I noticed some 20, 30 years ago that many of my friends would say something like, well, I was really stressed at work and I was, you know, so looking forward to the holiday, and, you know, a lot of effort to finish all the work up and rush to the airport and get on the plane. Then I got on the plane. I was so pleased. You know, I'm on my way on holiday. And then it must have been the air conditioning in the plane. But by the time I'd landed, I got a cold,
Yeah.
or got a flu.
Mhm.
Now, was that contagion, or was it their body responding to their relaxed state? I mean, what happens when you get a cold? All the snot comes out, and you're sweating, you're burning off stuff. Um, is that a detoxification reaction?
Yeah.
You know, suddenly I mean, it's like people, you know, people near death, they can hold on and not die because they want to see their daughter, or they want to wait for an event, and then the moment the event's over, bam, they allow themselves to go.
Mhm.
So I think we are at one level in quite a lot of control of our bodies, and you know, because they haven't actually proved infection, as ridiculous as that appears, um, I still don't really know what a cold and a flu is. Certainly, you're getting an awful lot of stuff out, that's for sure. Um,
Yeah, there doesn't
so,
seem to be any actual consensus on what these things are.
no, and you know, just because they say we've identified a virus, well, as I think most people listening to this probably know, no government, no hospital, no medical establishment around the world has been able to come up with a sample of a COVID virus that you can examine under a microscope. It doesn't exist. What they're saying are cases, and you know, it is a computer model. It's a computer model. It's like somebody making a photo fit picture of you, showing it to people, and they say, yes, I recognize that person. Well, no, they can't, because it's a photo fit. It's not actually you. Um, so it's a curious situation where this whole world has been thrown upside down for something that nobody can prove actually exists. It's super bizarre. So in answer to the shedding, I just don't know. Don't know.
Yeah.
But a lot of people have been suffering from, blocked noses and lack of taste and smell and headaches and fevers and so on, which would appear to be more virulent than past flu events. I mean, over the I stopped getting flus when I started taking vitamin D in winter, but um, the people who are getting them are seriously suffering. It's something real is happening, which seems to be worse than normal. But when I used to get flus or colds, I'd lose my sense of taste and smell. The symptoms that are now being said, oh, this is so new and so terrible. Well, it's a lot like what I remember. Maybe it's worse, but still, it's we're self-repairing. You cut your finger, you can self-repair if you're healthy. If you're old and infirm, it may fester and never quite repair. But we are self-repairing. We regrow our teeth, we regrow our nails. We're self-repairing in every way. But if we're not putting the right fuel in the tank, we're low on zinc or we're low on vitamin D or vitamin C or whatever it might be, then our body may not be able to self-repair. So I started getting into supplementation when I was ill 30 odd years ago, 35 years ago now. And then some 15 years ago or something, I started a supplement company because the problem is you go into a health food store, bear in mind that Holland and Barrett in the old days was owned by the Carlyle Group, who are arms traffickers.
Yes, I heard this.
You can trust, arms dealers with your health, can't you? They care. I realise you go into even a good health food store, how do you know what's good? There's so many brands on the shelf. And so I decided I'd start a supplement company, mainly because I tried one product myself. I'd been researching what the Chinese were doing for curing cancer. Now, in England, because of the Cancer Act, if I use the word cure or cancer, I'm spelling those two words with a K, cancer with a K, because legally, if you use cancer and cure together spelled with a C, that's illegal, because only doctors can cure cancer.
Oh,
Nobody else can. You can't do it yourself.
no,
So, so forgive me, I lost the plot there for a second.
sorry.
Anyway, I started a supplement company. Yes, that's right, because I discovered one product called Fulvic Minerals, and these are soil-based minerals, and we are from the soil. We go back to the soil. If you think about it, let's say you went into an old forest and you dug down a little way. Really, all life, or what's left of it, is there, right? Everything's ever lived or died, every leaf, every butterfly, it's all fallen down in the soil and is there. So what I discovered was the Chinese were using these soil-based minerals with incredible effect, incredible, not just cancer, but all things across the board. And so I started really researching it. And before the program started, we were talking about the Hunza Valley in Pakistan. And the Hunza are the longest lived people in the world. They used to be. Women were recorded by the Raj as giving birth at 70 years old, people living to over 120 and still fit and strong. And anyway, so I started studying Hunza Valley water as well as the Chinese, and why the Hunza Valley was so rich, why people were so healthy there, was glacial meltwater. As the glaciers melted, they ripped the rocks apart, and so they were feeding their soil, drinking in this mineral dense, they called it, I think volcanic milk, no, glacial milk water. And so fulvic minerals is a sort of slightly similar thing to that. And so 30 million years ago, scientists believed that things were very different, that there was maybe 4 times more species on the Earth, and that plants grew much taller, giant mushrooms, giant everything. And then there was some cataclysm and things got knocked back. Anyway, this stuff comes from a 30 million year old deposit. And it's not just that it's 30 million years old, there are these weird places geologically around the world where something happened, who knows what, and there were these huge concentrations of fulvic minerals in the soil. There's one small area in the States, it's only about a mile or something wide, where they mine this stuff. That, you can get it from all over the world, but there's one source which is just dynamite. And anyway, I've been sending off around the world for various samples of fulvic minerals, just testing them on myself. I'm not very sensitive, I don't really notice anything, and I tried loads of it and nothing affected me. Then previously, quite big bottles had turned up from places like Utah. Anyway, they didn't seem to work for me. Anyway, then this tiny bottle turned up, and there's 4 months worth in here. And I thought, well, that's quite impressive. Just water extracted. It's not made with chemicals or anything. You just run water through this sort of soil over and over, and there you've got it. And so I tried it in the afternoon, and the next morning, it was really odd. My whole body felt different. I felt younger and more flexible. I never felt, a change like that so quickly. And anyway, so I started sending off. I bought a gallon of it, and I started giving it to my clients. And the first person who came back to me, actually the first person I'd given it to, was a friend with morning sickness. She was, I don't know, 2, 3 months pregnant, and she rings me up 3 days later and says the morning sickness has stopped. I thought that's odd. Now, I'm not saying it's the cure for morning sickness or something, but in her case, women are meant to have morning sickness. Women are meant to have healthy pregnancies. Everything should be fine. But let's say the woman can't cope with the hormonal changes that are going on with the birth process. Well, maybe that's because they're low on minerals, vitamins, particularly fulvic minerals. So it became, I started a supplement company because of this product. And then I knew what to go for next. I went for magnesium as the second one because that's the arthritis. But I'm not saying it cures all arthritis. There may be other factors, but it's the big one. And then I added iodine to the list. Then I added Celtic Salt, which is unprocessed sea salt. It's slightly grey coloured Celtic salt. You can buy it online for 10 quid a kilo. It tastes incredible. If you think you like Himalayan salt, wait till you taste Celtic salt. It's a miracle. Tastes fantastic.
You would just use that in place of
instead of normal salt. It's just dried sea.
Yeah.
Salts like Malden sea salt, they bleach it to make it sparkly white.
Sure.
And in that process, it's no longer 100% natural.
No.
So, real salt generally tends to be a bit grey coloured. Celtic salt. Anyway, I added a few more supplements, and I started a supplement company. I've sold it now, but I've since started another one under my own name.
Yes.
And I don't have a lot of supplements on there. When I had my first company, at one point I think we had 150 different products. Yeah. Now I've scaled it right down because what I realized is pretty much everybody is basically low on maybe 10 basic things. And if you get those 10 basic things right, and ideally try and clean up your diet a bit, so many people get better, it's silly. Then I started to realize that it's all about not only the quality, which was my first focus, but the second one was on the quantity. Now, people listening to this, they might think, well, let's go out and get some high quality magnesium. And then they might read the label, it might say take 2 a day, or might even say take 4 a day. Now, for most people, if they read take 4 a day, they probably won't. They'll probably just take 2. So, is 4 enough? Seldom. Really seldom is 4 enough. Generally speaking, I say to people, depending, why don't you try 12? Wow. 12 in a day of the highest quality you can get. I think 12, that's absolutely outrageous. But the point is that if you take 4, that's roughly equivalent to the RDA, the recommended daily allowance. Now, the recommended daily allowance isn't how much you need to be healthy, it's how much you need not to die.
Yes, exactly.
So,
yeah.
I've had people, well, this year alone, no, I'm sorry, last year.
Mm.
Last year, I've had people who have taken 12 magnesiums in divided doses over a day with water, who have said, I've just slept through the night. I never slept through the night. Again, this doesn't work for everybody. I've had people say, my depression's gone.
Wow.
I've
Yeah.
had people who were suicidal
Mhm.
saying, well, my depression hasn't gone, but I'm not suicidal. Within 24, 48 hours,
Incredible.
super quick.
Mm.
Um, and so I got more and more interested in what are the real doses for everything? How much do you really need? Because let's say a manufacturer who hasn't studied to that depth, what they want is to be able to come up with a product that's at the right price, so that somebody at $9.99 or $19.99, but not too expensive, and they want them to feel that two or might be enough. Now, most of the health supplement industry is owned by the bad guys. It's
Yeah.
actually owned by the pharmaceuticals or whoever it is. And so they don't really want you to get well. They want you to say, well, I tried magnesium, didn't work, right? They're never going to take 12. Never, never, never. So I think there's one company in America and myself who actually put 12 on the label. And most people just don't dare, I suppose. And my magnesium doesn't cost $19.99. I can't remember what it does cost, but it's probably more like 30 quid. But it works. And you see, let's say you go into the store we mentioned earlier by name. Now, if you go in and just look for the magnesium, they'll have a few different types, but the one that they're pumping at the front, with the one they want you to buy, it's the price you want. It's quite cheap. Usually, what that one is magnesium oxide. And I want to stress that the one you do not want is magnesium oxide. Now, if you're badly constipated, it'll cure the constipation temporarily, but it's not the one you want. All magnesium is a relaxant. So what magnesium does is it just relaxes your mind, every cell of the body, right? Relaxes your muscles. So if you take, let's say, too much magnesium, you'll end up in the bathroom with diarrhea, no matter how constipated you are, assuming you've got enough water in your system. A lot of people are constipated from dehydration, but almost everybody is low on magnesium. And so what does magnesium do in the body? Well, it relaxes the bowels, so you can get normal bowel movements going on, relaxes the heart, so people with heart problems, people with heart arrhythmia, very often that is a lack of magnesium being displayed right in front of you. People with arthritis, like myself in the old days, people with back pain, joint pain, muscle issues, almost all of that is magnesium deficiency. Let's say people have headaches, they're tense, they've got migraines, magnesium deficiency probably. It just goes on and on. If you've got problems relaxing, let's say you get panic attacks, anxiety, magnesium deficiency probably. Magnesium is the number one mineral. It controls thousands of reactions in our body, like enzymatic reactions in our body. Magnesium allows more or less everything else to work properly. So why are people low on magnesium? And I would go so far as to say that 90% of people are probably low on magnesium but don't realize it. Why? Because magnesium allows you to relax, and we are all stressed, particularly now, last couple of years. People are stressed out of their minds, so they're burning through their magnesium levels until they're gone virtually. Now they're getting aches and pains and headaches and whatever it may be, and people need to realize that with a good quality magnesium, things can change very rapidly for most people. It's incredible. Incredible.
And it's very little talked about actually, with all the different vitamins and minerals, and people probably talk more about vitamin D these days. Magnesium, you don't really hear spoken about, you know, to any great degree, I would say.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, it's obviously really, really important. What's the difference between taking a tablet or having the spray that you
Okay.
can spray
Now,
directly into your skin?
when I first was promoting magnesium, I tended to promote the liquid, the spray,
Yeah.
because let's say somebody's got a bit of an ache.
Hmm.
If they sprayed liquid magnesium, which is magnesium chloride, if they
Yeah.
sprayed that on, let's say every hour, and rubbed it in, rubbed it in, rubbed it in, rubbed it in, all day long, the pain may go away. And you can rub it into the whole body. People take baths in
Yeah.
magnesium. You know, the type that you rub in magnesium chloride is otherwise known as Dead Sea salts.
Mhm.
And loads of people, particularly if they're older, will recognise that Granny used to have baths in Dead Sea salts. And Dead Sea salts were famous. In fact, the spas, the famous spas around the world, which the doctors would send the people who were limping to get rid of their arthritis and so on, those were magnesium baths.
Yeah.
You know, there's a hospital in Bath called the Royal Mineral Water Hospital.
Yes. Yeah.
There used to be hydros, they used to call them, mineral water hospitals, you might say, with with hundreds of rooms because of the healing benefits of magnesium-rich water and other minerals. And then I realised that actually tablets were way more effective. Oh, sorry, capsules were way more effective, mainly because I have various capsules on the side, but the main one is a blend of magnesium bisglycinate, malate, citrate, L-threonate now he's changed it, and taurinate, which is good for the eyes. So
Right.
many, many different types of magnesium, and each one has a slightly different effect. All of them, with the exception of oxide and hydroxide,
Mhm.
all of them, apart from those two, work really pretty well. But citrate, for instance, tends to give people more diarrhea, whereas some of the other ones don't. So over the years, I've refined the formula to
Mhm.
try and find something that seems to work for pretty much everyone really well and effectively. And that yeah, it's L-threonate, for instance, is supposed to have the ability to cross the blood-brain barrier, the easiest one. So people who are neurologically
Mhm.
challenged, that may be the best one. But
Mhm.
I generally speaking, with rare exceptions, I just recommend the blend. It works super well.
Right. So that's magnesium. I was going to ask you actually, Clive, what, if you had to kind of name the top three, or, say somebody didn't have very much money and couldn't maybe afford to get a whole plethora of supplements, or just don't really end up not taking them all because you end up rattling away, with pots and pots of things. What would be the top supplements, minerals, vitamins, whatever, that you would recommend that everybody takes? Me, Lulu, the dog's off. There's nobody out there. Let's ignore him.
So, I mean, as I mentioned, the first three that I brought out, one of them was iodine. Now, iodine is another massive one, and a bottle this size costs 20 quid for a year. So, I mean, people can't complain they can't afford it. So, um, let me run through what the iodine deficiency symptoms can look like. One doesn't have to have all of them, you can just have one of them. Dry skin, uh, the outside of your eyebrows thinning,
That's interesting to know.
dry skin on the elbows.
Right.
Quite a lot of people have had over their lives. Suddenly they've got dry elbows. Why is that? Iodine deficiency. Um, Brain fog. You're just not as sharp as you used to be.
Mhm.
You walk in a room and you just can't remember why you walked in. Where did I put the car
That
keys?
feeling, yeah.
Iodine deficiency. Thyroid issues. Iodine deficiency. temperature out of control. Somebody touches your hand and, oh gosh, you've got cold hands, or you've got really hot hands. Temperature out of control, menopausal women, iodine deficiency. So, there are others, but those are a few of them. How many people are deficient in iodine? Well, Dr. Brownstein in New York, he's tested thousands and thousands of people. He found that about 96% of everybody who was tested was low. There was a test done in the UK of teenage girls at school. 45% of them were low on iodine. So what does that mean to that teenage girl? What it means is they may have some hormonal issues going on, because iodine and cholesterol are both necessary components of healthy hormones. But let's say that woman now wants to give birth. Now, if they've been low on iodine for a long time, the baby will be low on iodine. Now, there's a medical term for highly clinical deficiency of iodine to a dangerous level, leads to mental retardation. It's called cretinism. The child is born with cretin if the mother is low on iodine. So if 45% of girls are low on iodine, that's according to the test some years ago. I reckon it's much, much higher. That means that all their children will be born not mentally retarded, but they won't have the IQ they should. If you want a baby who's going to have a high IQ, you've got to make absolutely sure you've got all the components to allow that baby's brain to develop properly. And iodine is crucial. So let me give you another glance at iodine. In Japan, there's a very low level of breast cancer, and women don't suffer from hormonal issues at menopause like the English do. Why is that? Because they're eating so much iodine with every meal because of all the seaweed and the fish.
Yeah.
They eat seaweed for breakfast, lunch, and dinner generally. So they're not short on iodine, and they don't have the problems that are prevalent here in the UK.
They're very long-lived as well, aren't they? I know there's an island somewhere in Japan where they eat huge amounts of seaweed that's very concentrated in iodine, and again, they're living routinely, like well over 100, but very, very active with it. The mind's fully functioning. They're fit, healthy, and they've kind of did a study and narrowed it down. And said this was the component that made them stand out. It's all the seaweed, all the iodine they were eating.
Well, that's right. There are other factors like selenium, and I'd like to talk about selenium. But the iodine, it generally takes about 6 weeks of taking iodine and selenium together, preferably Celtic Salt, which helps too, for the brain fog to lift and people start noticing that, my skin isn't dry anymore, or whatever it might, or my temperature control is better, whatever it is. But the thing is that, let's say you went to the doctor and you said, look, I've heard this bloke talking and I think I'm low on iodine. Well, A, they don't test for it. B, let's say they agree and say, yes, you're low on iodine, so look it up in their book and they'll be told that you should take whatever it is, so many micrograms of iodine. That's what they're taught at medical school. But this is rubbish. Dr. Brownstein, the medical doctor in New York, he doesn't give micrograms. He gives most of his patients 50 milligrams.
Wow.
Every day, 5 days a week, until their symptoms come down. Then he drops them down to 12.5 milligrams, about 2 drops of this, which is exactly the level that the Japanese women intake because of their diet. So I recommend everybody either watch a video or read the book Iodine, Why You Need It and Why You Can't Live Without It.
Right, okay.
So iodine's a huge one. Another huge one, again, that most people have no idea about is selenium.
Yes. I don't really. I've heard of it, but again, kind of like the magnesium, it's not one of those that's kind of discussed much.
Well, that's right. And it's just a mineral like magnesium or
Mhm.
sodium or any other mineral. It's just in the soil, or is it? Modern
Right.
farming methods have depleted
Yeah.
most of the minerals. And so selenium, some parts of England have almost none in the soil, and some parts are sort of all right. But it depends what you're eating. And you buy a tomato or a pepper or something from the supermarket. Was it ever grown in soil in the first place, or was it grown in Holland in some sort of aquaculture type
Mm.
system? So um, so I knew about selenium. It's important for diabetics. It's important for all sorts of people. But a couple of years ago, I met this scientist in America who introduced me to another type of selenium. And this type, selenium, can have toxicity to it. Often it doesn't. Brazil nuts are the food with the most selenium in, and Brazil nuts aren't toxic.
Mhm.
But there's another nut which uh, is what my selenium is made with, and this is non-toxic. And it turns out back in I think 70s, 80s, something like that, they were doing methadone trials in New York, and they found that with high doses of this particular type of selenium, they could get people off heroin and methadone. Since then, I've been giving it to people for um, people who are addicted, wine,
Mhm.
booze, drugs, whatever. It's incredible for addiction. Let me explain how it works. Let's say somebody's drinking every day, every day, every day. The body, to help them cope with, a toxin, if you like, too much booze is a toxin, just like too much heroin or, toxins. So the body makes antitoxins to help balance out this constant poisoning. So if somebody goes cold turkey or they decide to stop the booze, they might get shakes or
Yeah.
nasty reactions because the body hasn't figured out they've stopped the toxin, so it's still pumping out the antitoxin. What selenium does is it switches off or neutralizes the antitoxins, so people can have a super easy transition back to normality. In the last year, I've had somebody who had been on ADHD medication for most of their lives. 3 days later, taking 7 drops of selenium off the ADHD medication, first time in their lives, without any issues or even noticing it. Um, I've had people, come off, anything you can think of, not everything, but a
Mm.
lot of people come off a lot of stuff with the help of selenium. Now, I had somebody, every month I have a meeting for the Secret Health Club members on Zoom, and I had somebody just a couple of days ago whose depression had ended with the selenium. They'd taken 20 drops for I think 3 days in a row, might have been 2 days in a row, and had overcome their depression.
Amazing.
Why it did it, I can't be quite certain,
Mhm.
but Uh, super interesting product. Now, unlike the iodine, it's not quite as cheap,
Mm.
but for most people, an average, for most people, they don't need 7 or 20 drops. They would take maybe 2 drops every 3 days or something like that. For myself, I might take 10 drops when I feel like it every week or two, you know. But I also eat Brazil nuts from time to time. There are a few foods with selenium in, but it's very, very, very interesting. But and it makes iodine work properly. You want to take iodine and selenium together.
Together.
Uh, but there's another material that I started using for addiction some years back, which is a special blend of amino acids. Amino acids you get from protein. Um, People who aren't eating meat products, uh, the the amino acids you can get from vegan, vegetarian foods, proteins like beans and so on, aren't as bioavailable as the stuff from the meat products. So people who happen to be veggie, or, well, let's say they're not eating dairy or meat, that type of veggie, or vegan, they can be pretty low on amino acids. And amino acids are about energy. They're about a lot of things. But the first time I started using high doses of amino acids was with addiction. I had one guy some years ago, and I watched him get out my car, and I wasn't sure whether he was going to make it from the car to the front door. You know, he was all over the place. Anyway, he does, and he flops down on my sofa, and he's exhausted from the walk from the car. And he says, "Do you know, Clive, I haven't eaten food, not really, for several years because 4 bottles of white wine a day are all the calories I need."
Oh, wow.
He was clearly wrong because he was falling to pieces. You only need
Yeah.
8 bottles. Anyway, I had 8 bottles of amino acids on the shelf, and I said, "Look, why don't you take a third of a bottle right now? It's the morning. Take another third of a bottle in the evening, and another third of the bottle. Sorry, one after lunch, and one 3 times a day anyway." So I give him the 8 bottles and a few. I give him Fulvic Minerals. I give a few things to everybody, but it was the amino acids I was targeting for him. At that point, I didn't know how effective selenium was, so I didn't give him that. I didn't have any. Anyway, I had a week's worth on the shelf. Give him 7 bottles. On the 8th day, he rings me up and says, on when he got home that evening after taking, I think 2 or 3 doses, he said he poured himself a glass of white wine as normal, didn't feel like it, didn't drink it. The next day, after hardly eating, he went out and had 5 meals.
Good grief.
Anyway, by the 8th day, he'd run out, and I hadn't restocked yet. It hadn't arrived, so I couldn't give him any more, and he went back on the booze again.
Oh.
And he repeated the cycle of running out of amino acids about 4 times until he finally stocked up. Of course, you only need to do these mega doses for a very short time.
Yeah.
You know.
And then would you
You don't
continue
need to do
to take them? Would you continue to take them just, a couple of drops or, whatever it is to use as a kind of preventative, I suppose, or not preventative maybe, but just to keep you ticking over as you should be?
Yeah, exactly. One of my assistants in the past, she'd take half or a teaspoonful of amino acids every morning, and
Yeah.
on the days that she didn't, she was. But on the days she took it, she was bouncing around, full of energy. It really, for some people, it's magic. Some people, and but most people take 1 teaspoonful or 2 or maybe 3 or even 4 or 5 teaspoonfuls a day or something. But often 1 teaspoonful, it's something that people notice and feeling better in themselves. It's just we need protein, and some people need more than others, and some people aren't getting enough protein. Particularly people who are eating carbs primarily. We've been lied to, haven't we, about the food pyramid? It's upside down.
Yes.
They say you should be eating mainly whole grains and stuff. This isn't right. And most people have grains for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Pasta and pizza and bread and cakes and biscuits and sandwiches and cereals, and most people don't go a meal without having a grain.
No, not really. I mean, from the little that I've looked into it, we're not really designed, by all accounts, to be, for this to be processing through our body in the way that it would need to be for it to be actually good for us. And I tend to view anything it's put out in the mainstream as being, your 5 a day and this is what you should be doing. Sorry if I have trust issues with your recommendations, but I don't think our health is really at the forefront of their minds. So we've got magnesium, iodine, magnesium, selenium. So and amino acids are ones that you would recommend for everyone,
If you're
or
low on energy and you want to come off something, and amino acids can be helpful. And
right?
personally, I don't use amino acids because I don't need them,
You've got it. Yeah.
basically. But I'm really for saying to people, well, use what you need, but maybe
Yeah.
for a short time.
Hmm.
Yeah, for most people, they're low on everything.
Yes.
Most people are literally low on everything.
Yeah.
And so sometimes megadosing
Hmm.
uh, can be quite useful. You got to know what you're doing, and I've got videos on all these subjects. How to. I've got a video called something like supplements, what to take, when to take it, and how much to take. And to try and give a general guidance to people. But surprisingly, most people are in the same boat because most people are eating sort of the same bad food and are low on exactly the same
Hmm.
things. So other important ones, possibly more important than amino acids, vitamin D you mentioned. Personally, I take maybe 10,000 international units a day. When I discovered I was low on vitamin D and wanted to get tested, I went to my GP and said, I think I'm low on vitamin D. Can you test for it? And at that point, now they test for it relatively commonly, but then you say, well, I've never tested for vitamin D before. But he tested me, blood test, and he rang me up and said, how did you know you were so low on vitamin D? You're rock bottom vitamin D. And I said, well, I think you might find everybody is because it's November and there hasn't been sunshine for a couple of months. I think you'll find that everybody's low on vitamin D. And I think an awful lot of people are. These days, you can test yourself for about 15, 20 quid. You can go online, buy a vitamin D test, which is a finger prick,
Yeah.
and you can test yourself. But the doctor said, oh, what you should do is you should take 400 IUs of vitamin D. I take 10,000. But that's what the doctors believed then. Now they've upped it to 800 IUs, but that's still a drop in the ocean. And also, when you go to the doctor and get it, they give you calcium with it, which is absolutely wrong. Totally wrong. I would suggest that anybody right now who is taking a calcium supplement needs to reconsider.
Hmm.
Most people are not low on calcium, they're low on magnesium.
Yeah.
Magnesium dissolves calcium. When I had the calcifications of arthritis,
Yes.
that was too much calcium.
Yeah.
And so by taking a lot of magnesium, I just dissolved it.
Simple. Yeah, and with
So,
vitamin D, it's you should take vitamin K with K2
well,
with it.
yes, depending on your diet, if you're eating a sort of meaty diet and you're eating unpasteurized cheese or even pasteurized cheese, but um, in the spring when the grass is growing rich and fast, uh, all the animal products at that time of the year are super rich on vitamin K, K2. And but if people aren't on that animal front, yes, K2 would be a really great idea. K2 turns out to be the secret of healthy teeth.
Not
Absolutely.
calcium.
Not calcium. No, no,
No,
absolutely not.
that's a big myth, isn't it?
It's a myth. And uh, K2, if you've got teeth problems, you've got bone problems, anybody with an osteo at the beginning of their
Uh-huh.
problem,
K2.
yeah, K2, super important. And on my Secret Health Club, I've got a whole section on K2 um, because it's unknown, really. Although it's been known for 100 years. The head of the American Dental Association, Dr. Weston Price used to study tribes who'd been newly discovered, straight out of the jungle. They all had perfect teeth. The teeth might have not been white. He discovered people with green teeth and brown teeth because he never did anything with them. But he never found people with cavities. But the moment they went on the Western diet, cavities appeared within a couple of years. And he knew it was something in the natural diet that was giving people good teeth, but it took him years to figure out it was vitamin K, vitamin
Right.
K2.
Right. That's
Not a long time, but it's
yeah.
been known about. So that one's very important. With vitamin D, it is worth testing yourself after you've been taking it for a month or two, just in case you've been taking too much or too little. You want to make sure that the balance is right. I, I People say, well, what about a vitamin D overdose? Now, I've never personally come across anybody who's experienced a vitamin D overdose, even though their levels are quite high. But obviously it's good to get levels right. But
Yeah.
then again, it's who decided what those levels should be, because
So,
the doctors have got the levels all wrong. Let me give you another example, which I think is really important that people need to know. Let's say somebody's got energy issues.
mm,
Now, let's say they go to the doctor and the doctor's switched on and said, well, B vitamins are about energy. I
yeah.
wonder if you're low on vitamin B12. And they do a test. Now, their test isn't very accurate, but if they really are on the floor with uh, vitamin B12, they can give them injections, and then people feel really better right away.
Same thing.
Now, the doctors, I think, are only told you can have a vitamin B12 injection every 3 months.
Yeah.
So people go downhill, go back to the doctor, oh, that feels better.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
you can take sublingual tablets. There are various
Mm,
drop sprays, various ways to get B12.
mm,
And but let's say the doctor doesn't know enough about B12. A B12 deficiency can mimic symptoms, problems that are very serious.
yeah.
A long-term B12 deficiency can mimic dementia.
Yeah.
It can show up, it can mimic multiple sclerosis. Many people have been diagnosed with MS. No, it wasn't, it was B12 deficiency. And similarly, Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm.
People are wrongly diagnosed because the doctor doesn't know the correlation between low B12 and these really, really nasty diseases.
Yeah.
Then you go into our favourite high street shop and you look for the B12 and it will have the wrong type. Yes, it'll be the price you want, but it'll be cyanocobalamin. This is the wrong type. Um, it's hardly bioavailable, next to useless. If people take it, oh, I tried B12, didn't work. But if you try the good types, like hydroxocobalamin, then people can have a nice effect just by doing a few thousand milligrams orally. And it can be life-changing, absolutely life-changing. And people need to research it themselves. And bear in mind, if I've just said a number, as Mark Twain said, never believe what you read in a health book because you might get killed by a misprint. And check these things out for yourself because I might have misspoke. So vitamin C, absolutely massive. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the first time I saw terminal cancer reversed was with vitamin C, 35 grams a day. Doctors are taught that 1 gram is the absolute maximum the body can absorb. No.
It's just, I know from personal experience that's not true. I was taking it while I was unwell, and you certainly get to know what your limit is.
Yes.
It's you find out pretty quick because you're dashing to the loo. Worries, am I going to make it? But that's as serious as the effect gets. A bit crampy, rushing to the loo, and okay, that's as much as my body can kind of tolerate.
Exactly. I mean, the trick is, first of all, to find out what one dose you can tolerate.
Yes.
Most people can get on all right with quarter of a teaspoonful of pure powder.
Yeah.
Actually, I can tolerate a whole teaspoonful. I don't end up in the bathroom. But so once you've discovered how much is a safe dose where you're not getting a stomach pain or something,
yeah,
then you just keep repeating it.
Yes.
Now, I've got videos again on the Secret Health Club explaining in great detail, but my favourite video on this subject is reverse pneumonia in 3 hours,
Wow.
where Dr. Andrew Saul takes 2 grams of powder every 6 minutes. Right? 2 grams every 6 minutes, and his pneumonia ends. Again, I'm not saying that's going to happen for everybody, but it happened for him. And so the more ill you are, the more vitamin C you need. So the average person may only need half a teaspoonful a day or twice a day or something like that. But if you're ill, there have been cases where people have had 200 grams intravenously in a 24-hour period. 200 grams. The more ill you are, the more you need. And the only way is to test yourself to bowel tolerance. So you find out your initial dose, then you keep taking it, let's say every hour or every half an hour or every 15 minutes. If you can get away with doing it every 15 minutes, and then you've now taken 50 grams or something, now you're in the bathroom, okay, that's your tolerance for that day. So if you're going to do it again, don't go up to 50, go up to 35 or 40 or something like that. Push as close as you can to it. So one way of looking at it is, let's say somebody's got bacterial pneumonia or a bacterial infection. Now, the scientists know that bacteria reproduces really rapidly. It could be every couple of hours or whatever. So if you hit it every 6 minutes, like Dr. Saul did, you've won the race.
Yeah.
You've beaten it before it can carry on reproducing.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Carl, about a lot of people have been asking about detox. With everything that's out there or not out there, or whatever's going on with our bodies. What I've experienced myself and people I know is that have been really good with supplements, maybe not to the degree that they need to be. Now hearing about RDAs and but still generally not one to even get a cold when they go round, fit, healthy, and have been floored last year now, and I'm wondering, what do we do about detoxing things that maybe we need to be doing more? Things that worked before are not working in the same way. We need to up our game, and in particular detoxing anything that we might have absorbed unwittingly. Just what are your thoughts on that, what we can use?
Okay, well, funnily enough, pretty much everything we've discussed, while it's got all these building up properties, they've almost all of them got detoxification properties. I mean, with the Fulvic Minerals, for instance, this is one of the most powerful detoxification agents on the planet. So what are we facing right now? Well, we're facing graphene oxide. Okay. What neutralizes graphene oxide? Fulvic Minerals does. Neutralizes it. It's outrageous. Been lots of research on it. What else are we facing? Well, glyphosate, right? Roundup. What neutralizes that? Fulvic Minerals. Glyphosate is Roundup, and I was thinking of starting a new supplement called Round Down.
Yeah.
But my business colleagues said, "Well, do you want to stay alive?" So I decided it might be better not to. Vitamin C. Vitamin C is a fantastic detoxifier. Toxic metals, quite a lot of toxic metals being neutralized with that. So vitamin C is super important for a detox. Selenium, we've already discussed how that can work from an antitoxin point of view. What else? Charcoal. Now, there are two types of charcoal out there. There's the stuff that most people know about called activated charcoal, and that's the stuff in the emergency room. A switched on emergency room doctor dealing with a case of poisoning would use intravenous vitamin C and charcoal as some of their primaries. They probably use glutathione and various things, but you can only use that like once a week, activated charcoal. But there's non-activated charcoal, regular charcoal, which you can take several times a day if you want to. And let me give you an example of a toxic. I've had people come to my house, they've eaten out somewhere rubbish, and they're, oh, my stomach hurts. I might give them 4 charcoal capsules to take, and most times, within about 15 minutes, their tummy ache stopped, the gut ache. Charcoal absorbs toxins. It's fantastic, and it's pretty harmless. And I believe that in the old days, when we sat down for dinner, we would have been round the fire, breathing in charcoal dust from all the wood.
Yeah.
And now we don't. We designed for charcoal, I think. And it's been used for hundreds of years. I mean, an incredible detoxification agent, not terribly expensive, and I sell what I think is a brilliant old wood, deep-rooted, tree-based charcoal, not bamboo, which a lot of it is, but from old trees. And it's a very good source. And again, harmless, fantastically hard. All these things we're discussing, while, yes, with magnesium and vitamin C, you've got to be careful. You might get diarrhea if you take too much at once. Charcoal, fulvic minerals, safe as houses, really.
Yeah, right. And what do you think about pine needle tea? And there seem to be all these different things that people are putting out there as things that you can detox, I don't know, radiation and...
I think you want to be careful of pine needle tea if you're pregnant.
Yes, I've heard this.
Yeah, pine needle tea wouldn't be top of my list. I hear people talking about it online,
Yeah.
but you know, every part of the pine tree is fantastic.
Yeah.
Every part of it. The sap. You can make essential oil of pine, which is called turpentine.
Yeah.
Real natural turpentine, not the synthetic stuff, but pure gun spirits. Turpentine is the most amazing curative herbal product. And again, turpentine is something you really want to study before even considering using it, because you want to make sure that your bowels are working properly, all sorts of things you want to do before even considering turpentine. And I've got videos on that subject as well. But yeah, so pine I'm not too sure about, but pine pollen, for instance, which you can go and collect yourself, pine pollen is a sort of natural testosterone booster.
Really?
Pine is very important. I mean, most of the trees a lot of trees have fantastic healing effects, anti-pain. Birch, wintergreen. There are a number of firs and conifers and so on out there that have properties right across the board.
Yeah, it's amazing. There really is a cure or preventative, whatever it is we need in nature for everything. And I think the people have been really, freaking out about this situation we're in and getting ill or maybe getting ill. There is a remedy for everything, and even these terrible things that are being put into people's bodies at the moment. I believe that there will be a way for people to detoxify these things out, once they've stopped having more jabs. Depending, again, it's not going to be for everyone. It would depend on the health situation already, their age, all different factors. But I don't think it needs to spell the end, if we decide we want to turn it around.
Well, there is a lot of hope in various ways. I think one of the really important ones is probiotics.
Yes.
Now, because we're self-repairing, what is the most damaged part of everybody's bodies? I would suggest it's the gut, because glyphosate, Roundup, you eat regular food that isn't pure and organic and wonderful. Well, it's poisoned with glyphosate, a lot of it, and that destroys the friendly bacteria in the gut. 80–90% of our immune system, they say, is the flora and bacteria in the gut. And they've now shown that we have a second brain in the gut. And if your bacteria isn't right, probiotic levels are right, you're not thinking straight. And so anybody who's had a drug from the doctor, particularly antibiotics like when I had them, has a damaged gut. So probiotics are relatively inexpensive, and it's just getting a good one, because any old probiotic, people think, oh well, I'll eat a yogurt. That's not necessarily going to do it. Again, but I'll give you a great story about probiotics, show how powerful they are. The Volvo car company, they offered their staff one strain of probiotic, but you know, and I'm always sort of, but it was a really good one. Anyway, they said to their staff, look, we'll give you a free drink at tea time in the cafe if you'll take one probiotic a day. So the ones that volunteered for it got the free drink. The illness rates were almost zero compared to the rest of the factory. One probiotic changed things dramatically because we're self-repairing. So if the probiotic repairs the gut, suddenly you're repairing again. You're not ill. You can fight off all this stuff.
Yeah,
It's
it's
massive.
so simple, isn't it? It's we've just become so conditioned to depend on things like antibiotics, which, I mean, that the reaction you had, I don't think I've ever heard of such a severe response to antibiotics. I've known that over time they can cause real damage. You can have antibiotic buildup, and they basically stop working anyway. But it's so concerning that things that were, you know, up until recently just doled out like Smarties by the doctors can have such a devastating impact on the body. And had you not researched and you know, gone down the right path, you might not be with us now.
I would have been dead years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's scary. It's scary.
So
But
the probiotics that I recommend are soil-based. Again, like the
yeah,
Fulvic Minerals, they're soil-based
mm,
rather than cow-based.
sure.
I've got nothing against cow-based
Mm.
probiotics, but actually it's the soil-based ones that seem to have the real power.
Yeah, but would it be the soil that the cows will be getting it from themselves? Or is it more of a diluted?
It's different species, different
Right.
species. You
Okay.
have Dophilus and various.
Okay.
Uh, you know, all probiotics are great,
Yeah.
but some are better than others. And if a probiotic needs to be kept in the fridge, I would be very doubtful about it.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, you know, it's knowing the source of where you're getting this stuff from. I say it's why I started selling supplements, because I was fed up with people trying the wrong stuff and
Yeah.
telling me it didn't work.
And so many of the you know, the vitamins and supplements that we see in the place that we named earlier, they're just packed with fillers and preservatives and all kinds of nonsense that means your body can't even, they just literally pass straight through you, don't they? There's no absorption.
Yes. I mean, I'm aware as a supplement manufacturer that sometimes you need to use fillers and you need to use preservatives because of the nature of what you're dealing with. You know, some of these we're dealing with, like we're putting in doses that are on the head of a pin. You know, it's just
Wow. Yeah,
tiny,
that
tiny.
makes sense.
And actually, just to run it through the machine and put it in a capsule, you've got to have fillers. But the
Yes,
bad guys will use nasty fillers,
exactly.
whereas obviously, if you're a good guy, you try to use the most natural material. I mean, things like rice bran fiber and so
Yes.
on would be a natural filler. You know,
Yes, I should have
very
said
natural.
unnatural. That's what I should have specified as unnatural, harmful fillers and things like that. And they're just cheap kind of bulking agents. Yeah, which are no good to anybody. Great. So I've got a nice list here. What I will do is post links to, so that it's the Secret Health Club, that's your website, and you've got, I mean, there's just endless information there. Are you on YouTube and things like that, or have you been ousted?
I get banned from time to time, but for the last couple of years, I haven't put any controversial stuff up on YouTube, so I'm still there because I've got an archive of hundreds of stuff.
Right.
And while they pick them off, you know, I haven't got nearly as many videos now as I used to have on
Yeah, I'm
there.
sure.
A lot of good material is still on YouTube.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not allowed to talk about my website, so it's myname.com,
Okay. Yeah,
and
I'll take
there you can
that.
see, you can get a link from there to secrethealthclub.com, and behind a club, as you know, you can do things that are totally different because you're behind club rules, not society rules.
Yeah.
So When I started getting deleted from YouTube, which first happened, I used to work with UK Column back in 2014. All of us had to take all our YouTube material down. And so when that started, and I realized, well, look, this is vulnerable. My information is vulnerable.
Yeah.
I started this small club, personal members club. And yes, you have to pay a bit of money to join it, but you get discounts on stuff later. So it sort of balances itself out. So I can talk without being censored.
Yeah, which is just ramping up by the day, isn't it? It's this vital information that how it could be deemed controversial. I mean, it's just a sign of the times that we're living in.
It's just tyranny.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm also very involved with frequency medicine, using frequency devices, because back 100 years ago, it was normal to go into hospital. If it wasn't a mineral water cure, it would be electrotherapy. Guy's Hospital in London, I think it was 1843 when they opened their first electrotherapy department, and they would use devices using very, very low currents to heal pain or whatever you like. And so my hobby for many, many years has been looking at the old devices that they used to use and that used to be so effective, because when the pharmaceutical industry took over medicine, they closed down the electrotherapy departments, because you buy a piece of kit, a small electrotherapy device or something, and you fix somebody. Well, there was no pharmaceutical drugs needed, and the machine will go on for years. This is 20 years old, this one, and they hated that because there was no profit to be made. So they literally stopped teaching the doctors everything they used to teach. But by the 30s, you went to medical school, and all the CEOs of the director of the medical school were approached by the pharmaceutical industry, Rockefeller medicine, they call it, and we said, look, if you stop teaching all this rubbish like homeopathy, there were 20 homeopathic hospitals in England, roughly 20. You don't get to be a hospital if you're no good. You stop teaching all this herbal stuff and all this acupressure and acupuncture and whatever it might be. If you just teach drugs and radiation and surgery, we'll endow your college with 10 million quid. And all of them around the world basically took the money, or they got pressured and closed down. And the Cancer Act, where it's illegal to cure cancer, came in 1939, and Rockefeller medicine took over, which is where we are now. But the fact that there were all these natural hospitals around goes to show that it worked really well. And the history, I've got books and books from 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I started reading textbooks from the 20s and 30s, because by that time electrotherapy had got really good, and before the information got wiped out, I've got loads of books written by doctors explaining exactly how they cured everything with herbs or whatever it is.
Yeah, which is precisely the information that is being suppressed. And it's also all of those treatments, all of the things that were really effective and were used for hundreds of years have just been demonized as being quackery, as if there's this evolution where things get better and better and better, when it's actually the complete opposite. We've lost so much, and people just view those things as these outdated, superstitious nonsense that didn't actually do anything, which couldn't be further from the truth.
Well, quite so, but with all the doctors and nurses being sacked, I mean, don't you really know that the UK government are being about to sack, 250,000 medical professionals, have relaxed the immigration rules for doctors and nurses, so that so we're just getting rid of the honest ones who are true to their beliefs, replacing them with people who are coming over for the money, who probably don't speak very good English because they've relaxed the rules. And I mean, it's a nightmare. So there is a grouping, or several groupings around the world, of doctors and nurses getting together to plan working outside the system.
Yes, which is exactly what we need. We've needed this for a long time, actually. But yeah, it's the direction we need to head in, and start taking control of our health again, instead of handing it over to these corrupt organisations, because that's what they are really. They're organisations. They're not public services when you actually look into it. So, you know, it can only be a good thing. It's sad that it's come about because of this, but you know, it is something that's ultimately empowering, I think, for people.
Well, I think so. There are, of course, lots of positive things coming out of this nightmare. One last thing I'd like to mention, actually, you asked earlier about what do people do if they've had that needling going on.
Yeah.
One of the things that's getting a lot of publicity are things like the hydras and the self-replicating nanobots and stuff
Yeah.
like that. What would I do if I had to deal with a self-replicating nanobot? Not that I really know or understand what they really are, but apart from using supplements or whatever to try and overcome it, I'd be using frequency devices.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a little device that fits on your wrist, for instance, which is laser driven, and lasers have fantastic effects for the body. And so, if you've got something going around your bloodstream, you can just wear this a bit like a big fat watch on your wrist for half an hour or an hour to neutralize toxins in the blood. Now, how effective that will be, I don't know, but I would be using technology.
Yeah, and I think as we kind of go along, and these things will become, you know, people will be experimenting and learning about what's happening in the body and what we can use to counteract these toxins, essentially, aren't they, in whichever form. That's brilliant. Thanks so much, Clive. I'm going to put all the information of how to reach you along with this video, because there's so much to digest, and for people that are only just kind of hearing about natural health and what to kind of do during these times. Yeah, there's so much information, and it's easily accessible, so we'll get that out there. Is there anything else that you wanted to add or ask or put out there?
Well, yeah, let's talk about Stand in the Park for a
Oh,
moment.
sure.
What I've felt about parks for a long time is the insanity of it, in that you've got the big open spaces. Now, my understanding is if the council find, let's say, a peach tree or a cherry tree, something with fruit on it growing, they'll cut it down because their insurance says that if somebody slipped on that apricot, they may get sued. Now, many parks that I'm familiar with are barren wastelands where people walk their dogs, but there's nothing going on.
Yeah.
It's grass. I believe that parks should be full of food trees.
Yes,
Walnuts,
absolutely.
peaches and cherries and whatever you like. And I believe that people care enough about their parks that people would come and take care of those trees. Now, what if, let's say, instead of having a fabulous time in the park and meeting, that actually, well, let's say this, instead of marching to, let's say people march to Parliament when there's nobody in it. What's the point of that? Yeah, they meet their friends and they've got solidarity and togetherness and all that. But what if 1 million people, instead of marching, planted sensibly food? Now, they could plant food trees. They could go to the council and say, look, you've got this horrible piece of land here. We would like to put food trees in and look after them. So let's say the next time you eat a peach, you kept the stone. And when it's the right time of year to plant it, you prepare the soil, and instead of marching, you plant cherry stones, walnuts, whatever you want, and with people to look after them. It takes care to make sure they actually survive. If 1 million people planted one tree each, let's say around the world, instead of marching, people planted food. Just planted food, again, hopefully with permission from the council. I mean, how many streets look awful? How many streets look lovely because they've got trees lining them?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we could be planting trees in the right places. You know, as a protest, we could be planting a tree outside the CEO of Pfizer's house.
Yeah.
You know, we could be taking positive action that actually does something rather than just a march.
Mm.
And I think planting food, it could be in your back garden, you know, it could be, you know, but could they cover up the fact that there's a mass resistance because people are planting food rather than standing and chatting?
I mean, actually, this kind of thing is what's growing out of people coming together at the stands, for example, which they're not protests, they're not like the marches, and it's a place where people, well, they can get to know each other, meet like-minded souls, and actually start to get organised. And lots of people are now growing food together. So they've either, you know, they've got allotments or they've found land where they can grow food. And I think that is the biggest form of resistance, is to set up these systems in place of the corrupt ones that everybody's so dependent on. Absolutely, if 1 million, 2 million people were doing this, I mean, the results would just be, like you said, undeniable. And it would be freeing people from that tyranny. And I think it's the next step in the resistance, is taking that kind of action, taking our power back, removing ourselves from those systems where people have to kowtow. Otherwise, you know, they'll have no food, no heating, no shelter, basic human rights, which are now, they seem to be trying to convince us are a privilege. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think those public spaces, you know, they belong to us, and we should be able to grow food. I know in some countries, and maybe even in Britain, in certain places where they've got more enlightened councils, people are doing that, and you can grow huge amounts of food in just a small space when it's organically grown. Yeah, I think absolutely, let's get that going. Any stands out there that are up for it, for the challenge, why not?
But there's an example out there in England, which is the town of Todmorden.
Oh,
Todmorden.
okay, but yeah,
And those are videos about what they've done there, planting everywhere.
yeah, I think I might have seen something. Yeah,
I'm sure you have. It's been around for years.
yeah,
Guerrilla gardening.
that's it. Yes, absolutely, that's what we need, is more guerrilla gardening. Yeah,
Absolutely, because you know, they're using food as a weapon.
yes,
Right now, inflation and food shortages deliberately contrived.
yes.
Food is the most important asset, really.
Yeah, it really is. It's the one thing that, you know, they can really get you by the balls, you know, like if your food source is cut off, people are liable to agree to anything. If we take back the control over our food system, water, shelter, you know, all of those things, they really don't have anything that they can hold over us. And our numbers are so huge. It would only take a certain percentage of people being dedicated, and yeah, there's enough for everybody. It's a brilliant idea, and I do hope it spreads.
Well, you're the perfect person to spread it.
Yeah, I mean, we can, yeah, I can see what I can get going in my town, for sure. I like the idea of guerrilla gardening. It's got a good ring to it. Yeah, it's the right kind of resistance. We need to see more of that than, like you say, the protests and the thing, they have their place, but in and of themselves, no, of course, they're not going to change anything. They're symbolic and they bring people together, but actually we have to be going back to our communities and making actual physical change. And that's what kind of inspires others, and it spreads. And And yeah, that's a real game changer.
Free food for all.
Yeah, it's how it should be.
That's how it
It
used to be. It used to grow out there.
exactly. It's insanity. It's insanity what we've normalized. But you know, I do think people are waking up to what's happening. It's gone so extreme now, that you know it's too uncomfortable to just keep going along. We don't have that luxury anymore. So yeah, here we are. But thank you very much. I think that should, all that information you've just given should give people hope that, you know, our bodies are amazing things. And I've been saying, don't listen to these doctors who are, you know, they're paid by the system, they've come through the system, they're completely indoctrinated, and they're trying to make us believe that our bodies are weak, feeble little things that can't cope with this new variant, which don't even get me started on that, you know, those myths. And that you can only get better with this, that, and the other, and to basically not trust your body, which has been designed, like you say, to heal itself. And so, yeah, I urge everybody to check out all of Clive's videos, get over to the website, and yeah, that's it really. I think we're just about done. So I hope to speak to you again, Clive.
Yeah, dude, we've only
Really.
scratched the surface of health, really.
Yeah, it's awesome. So thank you very much. And yeah, I will speak to you soon, I hope.
Thanks, Fifi. I hope
Thank
so.
you. Thanks.